Hello and welcome to Business Daily. Today, the latest in our series, A Million by 30, when we talk to people from across the world who've hit that milestone. In this edition, it's the turn of Amarachi Nwosu, whose film about black people living in Japan has been viewed more than 1 million times.
Although Japan is known as a homogenous country, there are people of color who have traveled beyond their comfort zones to shape narratives on the Black experience.
Black in Tokyo is a 10-minute film which follows the experiences of 5 people living in the world's most populated city, Tokyo. They each take us on a tour of their neighbourhoods and talk to us about what it's like to live in a largely racially homogenous country.
You know, these people are interested in our culture, very heavy out here. I see a lot of things that we created that they're doing it, and they're doing it well.
I'm Sam Fennick, and in this edition of Business Daily from the BBC's World Service, you'll hear from Amarachi Nwosu, whose film is helping break down cultural barriers and has helped her learn about her own identity. Amarachi, welcome to Business Daily. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm actually Nigerian American. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I also lived in Nigeria in my early years. So I've really been kind of between D.C., Nigeria, as well as London, because my mom actually grew up in London. And so most of my cousins, about 20 different grandchildren, live in London. So I spent every summer there for about 10 years. And so I think this was kind of the beginning of like my world lens and perspective.
And you lived in Tokyo as well. I mean, 40 million people live in Tokyo.
Exactly. Yeah. So I lived in Tokyo for 2 years. It actually started through a school program where I'd won 6 scholarships to go. And so obviously being able to convince my mom, like telling her, hey, you actually don't have to pay for this trip. This is an experience that I get to go through. She was like really supportive. And my brother had lived in Beijing right after high school. So through that lens, I was like, well, if he could live there and be in a different society, in a homogenous society where there's not many people who look like him, but still be able to have a unique experience, why can't I? And so that plus my inspiration for so many Japanese artists inspired me to go.
And were you worried about going?
Yeah, I definitely was worried at first. I think it was definitely a challenge, especially because there's little images of what it would be like having my experience as a Black woman coming to Japan. And so I think that was even more reason why I wanted to document so much of my experience.
And that's why you made the film Black in Tokyo?
Yes. So the first thing that I did was try to do research on who are the people in Tokyo who are having a similar experience to me. And I really went on a journey to, one, learn through my experience, but also learn about other people's experiences of being Black in Japan. Through that, I saw an opportunity to tell those stories. And so it actually started from a personal idea that developed into a school project. I had to convince my class members, who none of them were Black, to ultimately invest into this project. And while at first, I thought it would be difficult, they all understood the value of sharing a unique perspective and the fact that this hadn't really been done before.
Well, let's hear a little bit of the film. This is my favorite bit.
We have a lot of Japanese. We try to introduce many Japanese about a Black culture, but the people that love it. And if you take a look at this picture, of course, you're going to see Black people. And most of the pictures we put it here, you can see many Japanese with the braid, with the cornrow. It's not they don't like our culture, but sometimes Japanese take a time to study, to know who you are.
So that's Lee, and he's a hairdresser, and he's originally from Ghana, but he moved to Japan in 1998. And in the film, you can see him flicking through photos of hairstyles that he's done. And he's actually braided his Japanese customers' hair, which, for me, watching it, kind of just show a real fusion of cultures, don't you think?
Yes, I think we're definitely in this global culture, and we see how culture is transcending beyond borders. And I think with Lee, he was a testament of that, to like come to Japan from West Africa and start his own business and start the first Black hair salon. He probably thought most of his customer base was going to be only Black people, but, to his own surprise, there's actually been a huge Japanese customer base for him, which also shows, the appreciation of Black culture that has transcended Japan. And so, Lee said something really powerful of Japanese people take their time to understand and to study. And sometimes in order to study, you have to be exposed. And so I think, any Black person living in Japan, they are some people's first exposure to what Black culture is.
I mean, the film does seem to be about how cultures can come together. We've heard about Lee there. There's also Amel, who is an artist from East Africa. There's an African-American rapper called Antarius, and a young military couple, Trice and Will. They're also African-American. Why in particular did you choose these people to tell their stories?
I definitely wanted to show the expansive lens of Black identity. I think a lot of the times how Black identity is projected in mainstream media can often be one-dimensional, but it's actually very complex. Lee's from West Africa, from Ghana, but that's a very different experience from Emma, who's East African. And the fact that Emma also came because one of her parents was a diplomat is a very different experience than Antarius coming for school or Trice and Will coming because of the military. And so I think everybody had a different journey of their why they came to Japan, and that was really important to expose.
I've read that you have described yourself as lost and without purpose. Do you think that making this film has helped you kind of identify your own identity?
Definitely. I think, everyone has their own coming of age story. And, sometimes you're growing outside of your comfort zone. And there definitely was a time where I was trying to understand my own why and, what my purpose was. And I think even doing a project like Black in Tokyo helped me expose my purpose and the idea that, through my vision, through my lens, I could create something that can transcend beyond my imagination. And it was also like an opportunity to expand what I thought I was capable of. I think the project stretched me. Before that, I hadn't done a 10-minute length documentary and edited a project like that. And it took this challenge in order to also see what I was capable of. So yeah, in many ways, I think Japan helped me. Ironically, Japan helped me find so much of who I was because I was forced to think more about myself introspectively that I don't think I would have had, living in America for that 2-year period that I was in Tokyo. And so again, like nothing grows in a comfort zone. And sometimes you're going to find, the depths of who you are in discomfort and in a new environment.
So you'd encourage people to travel then, would you?
Definitely. Absolutely. I think travel gives people a lens into different experiences, how people live differently. And so, again, even me being Nigerian American, I have a unique lens, going back to Nigeria, it's one of those things. Sometimes you're not Nigerian enough. And in America, you're not American enough. And I think living in between these two different cultures has also just allowed me to see the power of travel and expanding our mind and perspectives.
Well, I think that tees us up into a nice clip, which is another favourite bit of the film, which is a clip from Antarius Reynolds. He's the rapper that we talked about.
And it's kind of funny, when I first got here, I heard the term Black music. That's what all music that's made by any Black artist is goes under the umbrella of Black music. And me being from America, like the most racially conscious place in the world, I heard that and I was like, yo, what is this Black music? I don't mess with this. But after a while, I realized like it was just all out of respect. There wasn't any negativity in that term at all.
What I like about this clip is that it shows that a bit of knowledge on both sides. It's about discovering each other's cultures.
Yes, definitely is. I think, even hearing that from Antarius as somebody growing up in America, where identity and culture tend to be very charged, for him to hear Black music for the first time, it was probably a surprise to him. Like, is this an embrace or is this somebody saying something negative? But to his surprise, it was actually an embrace. And that's just how they identified that particular music. And so I think in many ways, it also exposed how quickly creativity and art travels and how it travels beyond, language and linguistic, because, a lot of these Japanese people listening to, this quote unquote Black music, they don't know what is necessarily being said. Not everybody speaks English, but there's a rhythm, there's a beat, there's an experience that they connect with.
Is there an incident when you were living in Tokyo, perhaps not making the film, just normal living, going about your business, where you have kind of demonstrated that about what you have learned about the Japanese culture or what you have learned about yourself?
Definitely. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of instances because I think because there isn't that much exposure to what the experience is like being a Black woman, I felt like every single room that I walked into was an opportunity for me to to define myself ultimately. In that sense of defining myself allowed me to show people who I was rather than letting a stereotype or an image depict that for me or for them. In every opportunity, the more cultural exchange that took place, like people were able to learn about me, but there were so many things I learned from Japanese culture as well. Even I would say the work ethic of Japanese people was something that really inspired me because it showed me also like the importance of attention to detail and being meticulous, everything from their architecture to their creativity to even the structure of society. And because of that, I think it was an opportunity for me to see how I can apply that into my everyday life. What I also love about Japanese culture is that with work, there's also this appreciation for nature and for family, for tradition. And I think that's something that was really powerful for me because as somebody of West African descent, it also showed me the power of embracing my own traditions and also being able to expose people in Japan that I am American, but I'm also Nigerian, because even the image of Nigerian people to them, may have not always been in the most positive context. And there were instances even where somebody kind of made a joke about an African security guard. And I had to tell them, actually, I identify as African as well. And so not every image of Africa that you see is the actual image of what it is. And so I had to educate people and have instances of that discomfort.
Well, let's hear another clip from the film, because I think what you like the film to do is inspire people to travel a bit more. And this clip of Emil tells us why that might be important.
For me, it was the first time I was surrounded by so many international people, like people coming from all over the place. And being part of that too was something really interesting to me because I started defining myself and talking more about my identity than I did back at home.
Being able to travel is quite a privilege, isn't it? You have to have, especially to go to Japan, which is itself a very expensive country to be in. During the pandemic, lots of people haven't been able to travel for the last 2 years or so. What impact do you think that might have had on people's outlook?
I think it's had a lot of impact, especially just even in Japan. Japan's borders have been closed to tourists since March of 2020. And so, while there are business travelers and student travelers who can go, I think that's really created a barrier for a lot of people who want to experience that culture firsthand. And even creators, like being able to document that environment, it's been closed off for that. And so even making a film that I did post Black in Tokyo called Women of Color in Japan, we had to shoot a lot of that remotely. And that was a challenge for me because, prior to that, I hadn't done remote shoots. So it really kind of forced me to lean on my community on the ground even more. And it's really just changed the whole filmmaking and creative process when it comes to documenting people on ground. But I think Emel's statement was really important because it showed that like her coming up in Djibouti, her experience, in society and culture was growing up around people who looked like her and who identified to experiences like her. But it was actually Japan, which is this homogenous society, that exposed her to an international community.
So, as we said at the beginning of our conversation, your film Black in Tokyo started as a school project, and now it's turned into a job, hasn't it? You've managed to monetize it. You've made lots of other films. And how would you describe yourself now?
Well, I describe myself as I'm a film director, but I'm also a creative executive, as well as a CEO and founder of Melanin Unscripted. And so the idea of Melanin Unscripted is really to show and expose the real life perspectives and the unscripted perspectives of people around the world, to really expand how we see identity and culture globally. And that wouldn't have been possible to really not only launch this platform, but also really expose the ethos of this platform with a project that would have been outside of Black in Tokyo. I think Black in Tokyo is the perfect description and depiction of what Melanin Unscripted is. You're seeing people of this culture and identity in the most unscripted format, because for a lot of people, this was their first image of seeing Black people live and work and experience in Asia. And so, that has allowed me to create a business infrastructure of, creative storytelling, as well as branding, marketing, and cross-cultural branding and marketing through a project like this. And, now I just finished directing my first feature-length film, The Ones Who Keep Walking, which is the first documentary feature on African creatives.
This series, Amarachi, is called A Million by 30, and you've reached 1 million views of your film Black in Tokyo. What do you think your next million might be?
I mean, I hope the next million's $1 million in the bank, but I would definitely say I want to continue to impact over millions of people. I want to continue to allow my work to transcend beyond the borders of my imagination. And, I see my work to continue to do that, and reach that really just reach that possibility. I would say beyond that, I would love to directly impact 1 million people to see the power in themselves to tell their own story.
That was Amarachi Nwoshu talking about how she reached 1 million views for her film Black in Tokyo, which you can see on YouTube. For more in the 1 Million by 30 series, listen to Business Daily on BBC Sounds. You can get in touch with us with your stories. Email world.business@bbc.co.uk. This episode was produced by Helen Thomas and Hannah Bewley and presented by me, Sam Fennick.